Hello everyone, my name is Jacob from FCP Euro, and you are watching the Volvo 2-liter turbo engine guide. The VEA family of engines is Volvo's latest and the last internal combustion engine to come out of the Swedish Mark's factory. This new engine was conceived specifically to complement the SPA chassis. One engine, one chassis, expanding to multiple cars, wagons, and SUVs, each with dozens of trim levels and configurations. To learn more about the SPA chassis, we have a buyer's guide featuring the XC90 SPA. With the solid core, Volvo can concentrate on making the most out of the styling, amenities, and safety features without having to start over fresh every time they wanted to do something different. Volvo invested billions of dollars on a new high-tech engine plant in Sweden to produce the engines and has delivered millions all over the world at this point. Instead of launching the new Volvo engine architecture with the SPA XC90 in 2016, Volvo gave it a dry run in the last of the P3 chassis cars. We have an unverified theory that this was not originally the plan, and that's why some of the last of the P3 cars actually got the RNC 5-cylinder at the end, perhaps because they had a bunch of engines left over. Currently, there are 3 generations and 2 fuel types of the VEA next-generation engine lineup. Let's start with the 2 different fuel types. The VEA family is split into a gasoline engine, the VEP, P standing for petrol, and the VED, with D, of course, standing for diesel. Real quick, the VED diesel was a basic 2-liter turbo diesel with mechanical water and fuel pump and direct injection. Some models were equipped with 2 turbochargers in series, much like the earlier white block diesels. None were available in the North American market, and Volvo had stopped producing diesel engines for their cars altogether in favor of the VEP in 2024. The VEP is the gasoline version of the VEA family, encapsulating all 4-cylinder engines from 2014 to current. Originally, it was introduced as the Drive E, boasting high fuel efficiency and differentiating it from the 5-cylinder models, since the P3 chassis T5s could have either the 4-cylinder or the 5-cylinder. In base front-wheel drive form, the P3 chassis cars that got the new engine could achieve over 36 miles per gallon on the highway with premium fuel. However, as more and more things were bolted on, the cars got heavier and more powerful. Fuel efficiency naturally suffered. Even in hybrid models, don't expect to break 30 miles per gallon combined once you have all-wheel drive and raised-up cross-country suspension. There were 3 main engine trims to consider. T5 would be your base engine with a single turbocharger, a BorgWarner KO3, and it made around 250 horsepower. T6, this is your top non-hybrid trim. It has a single BorgWarner B03G turbo and an Eaton supercharger. 4-cylinder T6s make between 300 and 315 horsepower. Alright, now let's talk about the T8. Now the T8 was only available on the SPA chassis. This adds a plug-in hybrid system on top of the T6 engine with a rear electric drivetrain. The T8 made around 400 horsepower when released in 2016 on the XC90 and was updated in 2022 to make 450 horsepower combined with the internal combustion engine and electric motor. For the P3 chassis, S60 and V60 Polestar models replaced the SI6 T6 engine with a souped-up VEP. This made 362 horsepower using both a turbo and supercharger. SPA chassis ditched the Polestar-specific models, instead adding Polestar engineered onto the T8 plug-in hybrid as the top trim. There are also 3 generations of these engines, but unlike some other manufacturers, there's not much distinction between them. Many VEP engines share the same main components from launch all the way to current. In 2021, a joint venture was formed between Volvo and Geely called Aurobay. This new powertrain company took over Volvo's internal combustion engine operations, but the factories, workers, and tooling all stayed put in Skåne, Sweden, alongside a division in China for Geely. This was to allow continued design and production of internal combustion engines while Volvo continued to stay on the path of complete electrification in 2030, a goal they recently backtracked on. The 3rd generation mild hybrid engines have massive changes compared to the first 2. 2 variations in the US, the MP for medium performance, which would be your B5, and HP for high performance, which would be your B6. A 3rd engine, the LP, which would be your B3 and B4, uses a Miller cycle 12-to-1 compression ratio variable geometry turbo engine let's talk about the hybrid system. The VEP has two fundamentally different hybrid systems hooked up to it since the SPA XC90 launched in 2016, excluding a few hybrid P3s that never came to our market. The T8 plug-in hybrid system is used as a way to add even more power outside of the safe realm for the internal combustion engine alone. This uses a flywheel-style internal starter generator module located between the engine and transmission. Its core function is to replace the starter and the alternator, providing power to the vehicle systems and making start-stop more seamless. The internal combustion engine is only connected to the front wheels. An electric power is supplied to the rear wheels via an electric rear axle drive. The ERAD's function is to supply power during electric-only driving, supply additional power during high demand such as quick acceleration, and act as a generator during braking to supply some power back to the battery during deacceleration. The ISGM, ERAD, and battery all have completely independent cooling systems. Now let's talk about the B5 and B6. These are considered mild hybrid systems. Charging is handled via a pulley-mounted ISGM, which is basically an alternator that can supply around 13 horsepower back to the engine during periods of demand to reduce engine load. There is no plug-in availability, and the B5 and B6 engines cannot run on electric power alone. These use a much smaller hybrid battery mounted in the rear of the car and is much simpler than a T8. Alright, let's talk about service intervals. The Volvo VEP engine has some fairly extended intervals, which in our experience can be more than likely due to environmental and regulatory goals over actually changing things when they need to be changed. These are consistent across all top-level engine trims, such as T5, T6, and T8. So, engine oil. The engine oil interval is 10,000 miles using a very special oil spec, which is a 0W20. Yes, this is thin, and yes, you will always have people that refuse to use it. But if you're looking for a recommendation from us, use the Volvo VEP specific 0W20 at around 5 to 7,000 mile interval. Alright, spark plugs. The electrode material is iridium, and the interval is every 60,000 miles. The spark plugs are the same for all variations of the engine. Now, when the mild hybrids came out, the part was updated, but the numbers were superseded, making basically all the spark plugs backwards compatible. So all VP engines essentially use the same spark plug. The insulator is thin on these, so the 14mm spark plug socket in your box that you have might not be able to pull the plug up. We recommend using a 14mm 12-point thin wall socket, which is made for thinner spark plugs. Engine air filter. The interval for the engine air filter is 40,000 miles. We have a 40,000 mile service kit for P3 or SPA cars that has an oil change, cabin filter, air filter, DOT4 brake fluid for a brake bleed, and fresh coolant for a more complete service. Belts. Finally, the timing belt and accessory drive belts both have 150,000 mile service intervals. This is why the genuine kits also have pulleys. If you're going to wait all the way to the 150,000 mile mark, replace it all. However, we always recommend inspecting these belts regularly, especially the timing belt for cracks or wear. The timing cover is plastic, and you can pretty easily take a look under there by unclipping some of the clips and shining a flashlight in. So as you can tell, Volvo created these engines with a basic design principle so that it can be expanded upon by using a variety of bolt-on accessories like superchargers and mild hybrid systems. That translates to a compact all-aluminum 4-cylinder with an open deck, a design Volvo has always liked due to better cooling capacity and lighter weight. There are some things that are brand new, however. The camshafts mount on the timing side using ball bearings to reduce friction and wear, as well as reduce the width of the engine. The oil pump features a solenoid, allowing it to be variable while still mechanically driven. This reduces drag when engine load is low and allows more control over things like piston cooling. Unfortunately, they dropped the dipstick, so checking your oil is done electronically via the dash. There was one major update on the VEP that Volvo was trying for the first time. The VEP features direct fuel injection, with the high-pressure fuel pump driven off the vacuum pump rather than directly from the camshaft like other designs. This protects the engine internals in case things go wrong and allows for easier packaging in the engine bay. Alright, let's talk about some common problems. When diagnosing issues with these cars, a high-quality scan tool is highly recommended, if not required. Due to the complexity of the systems, if you are having an issue with a check engine light, before doing anything, you should scan the code. More often than not, it will give you the best head start on diagnosing your issue. As a bonus, the SPA chassis can be plugged into your laptop using an Ethernet adapter versus using the outgoing DICE system. That means you could purchase a cost-effective 3-day VETA subscription through their online portal and have dealer diagnostic software available to you without even going to a dealership, which is especially helpful if you are far away from one. The temporary VETA subscription would allow you to buy and download software programming, although do expect some things like the Polestar Engineered Tune to be locked out of at-home software downloads. Before going into details, we want to make sure that while there are some common issues, mostly with early models, the Volvo VEP 2-liter turbo is a very robust engine that manages to do a lot with just 2 liters of displacement. With many complexities eliminated in favor of a high-quality conventional design, it really is very Swedish and very Volvo. Now let's talk about carbon cleaning. Since the VEP engines are direct injected, there's no getting around carbon buildup on the intake valves. Now luckily, Volvo did their homework and were very careful when designing the engine as well as the software to avoid events that may promote carbon buildup. For example, the EVAP purge hose is located directly in the center of the intake manifold above the throttle body for the best possibility of getting some kind of fuel vapors on the intake. It wouldn't be a Volvo without talking about the PCV system. Unlike many Volvos of the past, the PCV system is very easy to service on the VEP engine. The design mostly consists of an oil trap on top of the engine with a very intricate internal fine oil separator. This does a great job of removing the oil from the crankcase vent pressure and deposits the vent air far upstream of the turbo. There are a number of ways this can fail, including becoming clogged with oil residue or the diaphragm tearing. So making sure that this part is in good shape and doesn't have excessive miles on it helps to make sure your intake valves stay nice and clean. We have heard of reports of whistling or chirping noises coming from this box drawing too much vacuum. If you have some strange noises like that and they go away when you pull the oil cap off while the engine is running, replace the PCV oil separator. High pressure injectors work under an extreme amount of pressure and operate under very tight tolerances, no matter what the car. The Volvo VEP is no different, with occasional fuel injector failures, especially in the earliest cars. In our first-hand experience, a failing injector can manifest as a mild one-cylinder misfire. If you have a repeatable misfire on a single cylinder, pull the spark plugs out and check them for irregularity. If you still have it, label and swap the ignition coils around. If the misfire follows the coil, then we recommend a new set of coils. If it doesn't, you need to change the offending injector. Be aware if one injector fails, the other ones may soon follow. So to avoid chasing your tail, you might just want to replace all 4 and be done with it. It's also worth noting Volvo specifies that the high-pressure feed pipe is a one-time use part, so this should be replaced every time it's removed. There are a few other areas that should be kept in mind. First are the fuel pressure sensors. The low side sensor is a problem area and can be known to slowly fail. Look for code P0118C, which comes with low fuel pressure sensor B. These are easy to replace right on top of the engine, but be aware if you have a P3 with a VEP 2016 or before, the car shipped with a Cooper branded rectangular low pressure sensor, which is slightly different in design, and you will also need to replace one of the low pressure fuel pipes. We have a kit where everything you need is available. The high pressure fuel sensor is also not immune to failure. Although much rarer, more likely you may encounter a leak at the sensor rather than a failed sensor. Most likely engines that came with the Cooper sensor have been updated with a more cylindrical style newer sensor. The Gen 1 and Gen 2 engines used a high-pressure fuel pump unit. The high-pressure fuel pump unit on these engines is reliable, and we haven't seen a ton of demand for this unit yet. However, these pumps do get a workout, and if you do get a failure, expect code P087, along with complete loss of performance, up to and including a no-start or no-run condition. Fortunately, these are driven off of the vacuum pump rather than directly connected to the camshaft, making replacement easy and making a high-pressure fuel pump failure less likely to damage the engine internals. Remember to take all necessary precautions when working with a pressurized fuel system. Like all late model Volvos, the fuel system is returnless. The ECU uses data from the fuel pressure sensors and the engine demand to deliver a 12-volt PWM signal to the pump electronic module. Nearly everything on these cars is controlled by pulse width modulation signals rather than common DC. That must be factored in if you're trying to diagnose things with a multimeter. An oscilloscope is a much more effective diagnostic tool for these vehicles. Keep in mind, there's no external fuel filter on these cars in the US market, so don't buy one and try to find it. The ignition system on this car won't have any surprises. It uses 4 individual coil-on-plug ignition coils, and knock is determined by knock sensors. Like many other electrical components and sensors on the car, the genuine spark plugs are made by Denso and should be replaced every 60,000 miles. If you're getting a misfire on one cylinder, you may have a bad ignition coil. Start by replacing the spark plugs and examining them for uniformity. If one looks particularly sooty, that might be a clue. Like the fuel injector diagnosis, label and move the coils to different cylinders. If the misfire follows the coil, replace it. If it doesn't, it's more likely a fuel injector. We like to replace all 4 coils when one goes bad because the others are all likely to be the same age. Another step towards reducing engine friction and drag as much as possible was using an electric water pump. Volvo uses a Pierberg unit. There are a few extra benefits as well. When the engine is warming up, the pump is usually off unless the HVAC heat is on, or if you start driving normally with a cold engine, to avoid hot spots in the cylinder head and turbo. Also, if the engine is very hot, after driving on a hot day, the ECM is able to run the radiator fan and the pump to keep coolant circulating even while the car is shut off. It will also do this during start-stop. This electric water pump usually lasts between 100 and 150,000 miles, so if you're approaching that mileage, just be aware of it and consider preemptive replacement. Its failure mode is usually a complete functional stop, which can overheat your engine if you aren't paying attention. If that happens, a large warning will appear on your dash. Don't ignore it. With an advanced scan tool like Vita, you can manually cycle the water pump to tell if it's kicking on. The pump is actually very easy to change, right on the front of the engine. Just consider using a vacuum filler to fill the cooling system, since there are so many small coolant pipes that can become airlocked when the system is empty. The thermostat is a standard wax style and also acts as a bypass control since the electric water pump is variable. Early engines up to 2017 had an additional electronic element inside the thermostat that could heat it up for even more control over the operation of the cooling system. This electronically heated thermostat had issues with causing major electrical shorts and was replaced with a standard unit in 2018. If you have an electric plug on your thermostat, you can check the internal element. It should be around 15 ohms. Anything drastically outside of that, and it should be changed. If you are changing a water pump, it's a good idea to replace the thermostat at the same time, especially if it's the earlier electronic version. You can see the little plug on this one right here. And the newer version does not have that plug. Next on the list are intake seals. The T6 engines that have both the supercharger and turbocharger have a large number of intake pipes and resonators going through the engine bay. Instead of conventional barbs and hose clamps, many of these go together with squish seals and flanges. Volvo has redesigned some of these intake parts after complaints of bad seals and failures. For example, if you have a P0170 lean code, a very common code for these, this can either be your O2 sensor or an intake pipe leak. Tighten the intake pipes before anything else. And generally, if you bring your car to the dealer, they're just going to replace both the intake seals and the O2 sensor to alleviate any chance of this code coming back. O2 sensors. There are 2 common codes that you can get related to the O2 sensors, mostly specific to the front or upstream sensor. P0133 is described as O2 sensor slow response, which means the ECU is not getting the signals it is anticipating fast enough. This style of failure mode for the sensor can also materialize as a lean code. This happens because the ECU is not getting the data from the O2 sensor fast enough and is adjusting fuel trims incorrectly using outdated data. This inaccurate O2 sensor data can also cause a poor running condition, bad engine response, and a P0170 lean code. That's why, as I mentioned before, this code could either be an intake pipe leak after the air mass sensor or an O2 sensor malfunctioning. Piston rings. We covered this in detail in our SPA XC90 buyer's guide because it is so important, but any VEP overview would not be complete without the piston ring talk. Volvo was trying everything to reduce friction on these engines, up to and including trying out an entirely new piston ring design that had 2 oil control rings. This was supposed to improve emissions and reduce friction. Instead, the narrow passageways in these rings get clogged up and the result is oil being pushed up into the combustion chamber and burnt off. Compounding the issue were the extended dealer service oil change intervals of 10,000 miles. In addition to that, there was actually an oil shortage in North America for this special new spec oil. So Volvo is actually putting in a substitute 5W30 in the beginning. Many early adopters of the Volvo 4-cylinder engine were met with low oil lights halfway through their oil change interval. We have even heard it as bad as 2 liters after 3,000 miles. So here's the updated piston design. This is the conventional 3-ring piston, and this is a piston ring from the old style piston. If you take a look carefully, you can see the oil passages in the old rings are much smaller than the updated design. So extended oil change intervals and potentially not using the correct spec oil led to these passages getting clogged up, which is what caused the burning oil. Volvo eventually recognized the error in their ways and updated the piston design to a standard 3-piece waffle ring style and extended the engine warranty to 8 years or 100,000 miles. Many vehicles received updated pistons, but if you have or are looking to buy a VEP engine that was manufactured before the second week of January 2016, then be aware of this issue. If you have one of these engines already, we found that the oil burning can be somewhat mitigated by using the correct spec 0W20, a few reduced oil change intervals with Liqui-Moly oil flush before each one, and 1 Ceratec treatment. The oil flush helps free up clogged piston rings, and the Ceratec makes for a better cylinder wall seal. We have tried this. It does work. Replacing the pistons is of course the last option if you are intent on not burning a single drop of oil. T6 and TA cars up to 2023 were supercharged and turbocharged. The supercharger itself is an Eaton TVS R410 unit that is designed to work with the turbocharger to provide low-end boost and reduced lag, handing off to the turbocharger by means of a clutch. In normal driving, the clutch disengages around 2400 RPM unless torque demand is over 200 Newton meters. Then it will stay engaged through 3400 RPM, at which point it's spinning at around 19,000 RPM. The clutch disengages and a supercharger bypass valve closes to allow air to go to the turbocharger. The clutch on the supercharger is a wear item, and wear is exacerbated by hard stop-and-go driving in urban areas. When the clutch wears out, the engine will feel very laggy in the low RPMs, having no pep. Surprisingly, this will not throw a check engine light. Unfortunately, if the supercharger clutch has worn down enough, it will not be able to engage anymore, and the entire supercharger must be replaced. So, in conclusion, even with the rocky start, Volvo's VEA architecture is a masterclass in simplicity over complexity, taking the bare concept of a modern engine to its logical conclusion. So far in 2025, there are 19 different engine designations, ranging from the base model T5 all the way up to the mega hybrid T8 Polestar engineered. Yet all share the same core layout, really making this a smart move for new age Volvo chassis and engine concept. If you have any experience with the VEP engine or any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment below. Check out the rest of our channel for a ton of DIYs showing you how to take care of pretty much everything we talked about here. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.